Hello, welcome everyone to another episode of Energy Unleashed podcast. My name is Suzanne Worthley with my partner, Kim Hess. Hey there.
Let's unleash this. We're going. Let's do this.
We had to start twice because we were giggling so much. Hopefully we can edit that, right? Oh,
We're
anyway,
fine.
thanks. This podcast is going to actually talk about something that I find very personal and literally is personal because we're going to talk about personal space. And I just came off of an event up at the Palmer House that I taught on my Confident Empath book. And this came up a couple of times, and it oftentimes comes up in client sessions as well as my own life. And Kim and I, we've discussed this as friends and partners, etc. too. When you're going on a journey of sorts, when your personal spiritual journey is getting bigger and your vibration is going higher, I'm going to start on a couple of levels and we're just going to keep unleashing it at a higher level. But you find that if I'm holding a lot higher energy, again, this isn't a value system, but if I'm holding a higher frequency, I will be around, for example, my old friends or my old workmates or my family or whatever, and you'll find a clash in your energies. And oftentimes you're really uncomfortable around those people. Does that kind of resonate?
Yes. Not gonna say with who, but yes.
Yeah. And
Eh,
it's hard. It's hard. So you start to sit with yourself and think, did I do something wrong? Did I piss them off? Why aren't I friends with them? And then you start to recognize the more that you sort of suffer through those kinds of meetings and don't say anything, it makes it even more difficult. And one of our attendees was expressing how it's really, really getting hard for her to just hang out with her quote unquote 3D friends. Now, I want to be very clear. Let's not judge anybody 3D, 4D, 5D, 6D, 100D. It's not a judgment thing because it doesn't mean I'm better, but there is an actual frequency. We use 3D because it's the easiest way to describe things.
mhm.
And I want to make sure that we're not judging or sounding judgy because everyone is going to be where they at because they're choosing to be at whatever frequency they're at, right? I mean, this is a choice.
It is.
But there's also something to be said about if I'm doing a whole lot of personal work and I don't resonate with those people because they're talking very and I'm going to use it 3D, meaning we're talking about, the sports, we're talking about the financial systems, the medicine, how many drugs you're on, oh, my aches and my pains, versus really talking about consciousness, evolutionary things with like-minded people, you will find yourself wanting space from them.
Mhm.
And I think that's
Absolutely.
fair.
Yeah. I think I just went to a work function actually. They were closing the office of the company that I used to work with. And
Oh,
it was really great to see everybody, but I sat there and I'm like, I really don't have that connection anymore. I
mhm.
don't I and they're lovely people and
Right.
can hang for a while. And then I'm like, yep, I'm done now. This was really nice.
Yep.
And let's go on.
Yeah. So that's one of the spaces I
Mhm.
want to talk about, finding space, because you're going to find this happening as you change frequencies. Some days, even you could have been with those work people and tolerated maybe another hour, hour and a half. And some days
Mhm.
it's like, I got to go now. And those are really boundaries that I believe are important to honor as an individual. Then let's move to another attendee was really struggling with space in her home from her
Mhm.
children who are really quite small. And she said, it's very difficult for me to be going through these things like, oh, I want to meditate more. I want to sit with a rock. And my, 9-year-old or 7-year-old and whatever year old is screaming at me 24/7. And this is very difficult. I fortunately kind of had two of my four a little bit older, and the other two grew up with this. They call it corporate mom, witch mom, which is still cracks me up. But I was learning how to do this differently with the next two along the way.
Yeah.
And I always took space with these two, even when I was so-called corporate mom. I had Thursdays was Suzanne's day, come hell or high water. She would leave the house even if she sat in the car at the end of the road.
Mhm.
It was just that. And I stuck to that boundary even before I was in this world. So for me to stick to the boundary in this world wasn't too tough. But when you're not used to doing that, a lot of people have a very difficult time justifying that I want to go have some meditative quiet time and sit with a rock when my 3-year-old's screaming at me. So I had a client years ago who had two little boys and very, very busy little boys. And she created a healing room in a closet. And I'm not even exaggerating. A
I
closet. And she would
Seriously,
say
that's
to her husband, I'm
brilliant.
going to the closet.
Yeah. Because I was just thinking, when we had kids and they were younger, there was not 1 inch of space available for anything
Yeah.
out, to meditate or do whatever. It was, everybody had a bedroom,
Yep.
right? But my bedroom, it was with my husband. So it wasn't my space, it was our space,
Yep.
so there was I just thinking about that. There was no place in the house.
And so
Wasn't
if
taken
you
up.
don't have it in the house, it is really important if you choose to think about outside of the house. This is Kim's day,
Mhm.
and make it very scheduled, mostly for yourself.
Mhm.
Because if we start doing, oh, I'll get to it, or I'll do it this
You
week,
don't.
doesn't work.
No.
And not only are you training the spouse or the kids or the whatever in terms of this is important to find space, you're giving them that gift of understanding space is even important for you. If you want to
Mhm.
take every Tuesday or whatever. Our kids get a lot of space because they have sports or whatever they're doing in school, etc., and friends. But the parents want to start training the kids that this is okay to do even as an adult.
Oh yeah.
It's a great belief system to instill that quiet time and me time is priority.
Yeah, and it's interesting because of course, all your kids are different personalities, different, my kids were all different. My youngest, when things would get too hectic, like they were just busy and things were happening, she would gravitate to her bedroom and shut the door.
That's
She
awesome.
needed quiet time. And
Yep.
was self-entertaining. She didn't need anybody to entertain her, but she needed that quiet space. Um,
That's exactly what I told this attendee this weekend. Use the room of the child as a safe space and a
mhm,
quiet space because you're going to get the time and they're going to get the time. And this is something that we don't train our children towards. I think it's awesome that your kid did it organically,
mhm.
but this is also something we can cultivate as a family practice. I'm going to give you 10 minutes in your room,
Yeah,
you
right.
know, and you
Just
can have the
sit there.
timer tick away if you want to, but
Wait, is
you
this
know,
different than you're grounded, go to your room and make sure when I open the
yeah.
door it's all picked up? Is that
Yeah.
different?
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, isn't it great to empower them with that space instead?
Oh yeah. That would have been so healthy for all of us to,
Right.
because I think if you really feel like it's a safe space and you love that space, you care for it more.
Yes.
Or
And
if
you
it's a
would pick up your
punishment,
clothes,
yeah,
maybe.
if it's a punishment space, you don't
Yeah.
want to be in there. You don't want to be there. You want to be somewhere else. So
Hmm.
I think that's really, God, that would have been so great for my
And
kid.
it breaks up the chaos and the noise factor of the family. We don't
Mm,
have to all be chaotically running and being in each other's spaces and places,
mhm.
which brings me to the next graduation of unleashing. We had a couple of people who are retired and at the event, and it's like, yeah, now my spouse is under my feet space.
Oh
And
gosh.
oh my God, I was okay finding some metaphysical time because he or she was at work, and now it's like he or she is like in my pathway walking every 2 feet. And I can totally identify with this. It's really tough. All of a sudden, you have a flow in your home, and
Mhm.
now my space is absolutely taken over. And it's not that your spouse doesn't have a right to space in your home, but it's important for us to get some semblance of a communications or a pattern flow that doesn't drive each other crazy.
Right. And
It's
I think for me, what I'm finding, because my husband works at home, when
yeah,
I first, like, I didn't really retire, but not working. Um, when I first was home, the whole house was his office because I was traveling and in an office space. I wasn't
right,
here. So he would wander around the house talking to clients and stepping outside and walking through all the rooms and doing and I'm like, wait, time out. It took me, I'm like, this is not going to work at all.
right,
Like you need to stay in your office space or stay in the basement. I give you the basement. You do
right.
whatever you want in the basement. But yeah, I couldn't do anything upstairs without him wandering around talking to somebody else on his ear set.
Yeah, and they're like blah blah blah, and you're thinking over there you're just going to get 10 minutes with a cool podcast, but now it's like, wait, you just invaded my zen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah. And
I
it's
get
really
it.
something that is very, very important to figure those mechanics out. And I always tell clients as well to consider having a spot in your home that is yours. Even if you don't have a room, you can put an altar, if you want to call it that, in a corner that is your space to generate energy with and from. And this is very important in terms of, I'm going to pull a card and put it up there daily, or I'm going to put some fresh flowers or some fruit up there, or I'm going to actually have a candle lit while I do, even if it's 30 seconds of meditative intent. It's that spot that is yours that nobody else gets to dick around with, so that even if I need a very small amount of juju, I can go to that space.
Mhm.
Even if that space is in the space, it's important. Do you understand? That's
Oh
really,
yeah. Yeah. I think
yeah.
that was one of the, when I first started coming to you, is like, there's no place in my house for me to have a space. I couldn't find, trying to be creative, and it didn't matter what I tried, it was just wasn't working.
Yep.
Because I still had college kids coming in and out, and I had, someone in, I think they were all in college, but anyway, yeah, it just wasn't, but now I have my space. I
Yes.
totally have my, and I pull things out. I don't have things sitting out all the time, but I have my stuff
Mm-hmm.
in a
Mm-hmm.
place, and I can create whatever I want at any point in time. And it works really well.
There's also a space in our home. I do a morning routine with meditative reading and meditation, etc. And it's so funny. I think I said this the other day, and that it's a library. And for those of clients that know, the library is right here, and the bathroom is off of that. And I closed the two doors because I don't want to hear Good Morning America, where he's sitting in the kitchen watching that. And I close all those doors. And the very first week, he barged right in to go and use the bathroom or take a shower. And I'm like, uh, uh, no, no. And he's like, well, and in his defense, Suzanne, you have a whole healing room downstairs, go do that. But I said, no, there's two bathrooms in this house. If you need to use a bathroom, go upstairs and use that one just during this hour to hour and a half. And or if you need a shower, you probably can wait because you're not going anywhere unless you
Right?
actually. And so it's like no, no, no. And he said, yeah, but you have your healing room, you have this and that. There's also different spaces that mean different things, meaning I don't want to do my Suzanne work all the time in this office because this is my client office.
Well, and you spend a lot of hours in there. You need a
Yeah.
break from that space. It's like sitting in any office.
And I want to raise the
Right.
vibration of my home in different places. And this comes to another comment in terms of, remember, your home is a living, breathing entity in and of itself. And when I do house clearings, I can tell when people do not spend time in their so-called formal dining room or whatever, because it's dead space. And I told my husband, I'm like, Chuck, I want to raise the vibration in here. Plus, this is my metaphysical library of sorts. Well, it has everything, but still, this is my space for that. And I'm actually working in here on behalf of the space. And so, now we've come to terms with that, and he figured all that out. But, the first week was like, no, I'm half out of my body here. And all of a sudden, just to, go in and do whatever. It's communications in terms of, these are boundaries, and these are important boundaries, and why these are important boundaries. So I make an effort to move throughout my house to do different things. I will go and maybe exercise in the front more formal living room that we don't use so much anymore. I will utilize the porch in the springtime, etc., so that I move the energy around the spaces in the house so that everything can kind of come up to a higher frequency. Then I want to unleash this even more, because this happened as well at the event. Then I want to get into the sticky one. The sticky one is the more couples find themselves aging in their marriage or a second marriage or whatever. So many are so embarrassed to say that they don't want to sleep with their spouse. And this is something that I think needs to probably just be okay to talk about if you choose to. If you are spiritually growing, maybe you're doing work at night, or if you're wanting to really get sleep at night and the spouse snores and, flops all around, be okay with the fact that, go get another space. The kids are all gone. This is a big house. Take a different bedroom, and then make that bedroom, just like the kid, your space. Make that bedroom your sacred space. And if you want to still get together with your spouse, do so. But it's really important to know, as we physically, mentally, and spiritually are growing and emotionally growing, we want more space in that regard oftentimes. And this confuses so many of my clients, because they're like, oh my God, I'm the worst spouse. I just, either I don't want to have sex, or I don't want to be by him or her, or I want to just do this by myself, or I want the quiet. None of that is guilt-ridden. This is society crap that we put on ourselves. And it's really important to know that the bigger your field is holding, oftentimes it is a safer place to have more space for that. And it feels infringed upon when that spouse comes that has a lower frequency, and then I have to adjust.
Mhm.
So this class got really into it. It was funny. And then we went down this whole, lane of sex and how sex can really, be difficult if you're at two different frequencies and so on and so forth. So these are real energetic conversations. It can be really tough if you're a very high spiritual person and your spouse is basically really a low frequency or a fear-based frequency and you are intimate with one another. It's very, very difficult
Mhm.
because you're conjoined literally, and then it's hard to figure out how to make that work. So there's so much guilt attached with that in so many of the clients that I talk to. It's fascinating.
Well, I can totally see that. I mean, like you said, society has actually been a big part of what we believe around that relationship, especially growing older together. I mean,
Yeah.
it's but back in the day in the 50s, they had separate beds, but they were
Back
the
in the
same thing.
back day, they
Twin
all had they
twin
had
beds, you
different
know.
wings. This is your wing, this is my wing, and here's the conjoined room if we choose to see each other. I mean, that
Right.
was all common. I don't know when it got really crazy to not have space. I'm not
Yeah, I
sure.
don't know either. And it makes sense. It's I know that I don't think we're not at that point yet, but I could see it, especially when you're not sleeping well.
Yep.
When you're not sleeping well, nothing else works well,
Yep.
so I totally get, especially if you're not sleeping well, that you need your own, space. But like you said too, working during the night, I will get up and leave the room if feel like I've got a lot going on and I don't understand what it is. I'll go out to the living area
Yep.
and, do a little work and try to figure out what that's all about. But I could, I get all your points. It makes sense to me.
Yeah,
It's
these are all different levels to literally look at in your life and open up those spaces, whether it's kids or partners or, sex or work or the garden. I mean, it can be anywhere and everything. It's just important to have that safe space that is at that frequency for me to run to when I need it
Mhm,
versus oh my God, I'm having a really crappy day. Now I have to generate something in a space to get myself refueled. It should be the fuel station space. And I think that's really important. So, and again, everybody can take this or toss it because not maybe other people don't really care. But I even have some people that have found a massively beautiful space in their garden that does the same thing. I have one client who has a giant rock that he sits on. I have another, or walks through a valley of trees that they work with or whatever. It's important for us to find that space that's ours and nobody else's to come and stir the pot in. And I
mhm.
think that's just we don't think like that. We're not trained like that. And then we feel guilty, it's weird.
Well, and it's also that if you're busy in your schedule, it's making the time because you find your space, but you still need to have some discipline to want to use it and
Right?
make time for it. It's just like exercising, or whatever else. It's making time for it and creating the habits, to use it.
Well, and
So,
then it became chic and cool, I don't even know how many years ago to have a man cave. And it's the same sort of a principle in that the man cave was where we could be a guy and go watch our sports and drink our beer and we cultivate that camaraderie. And
mhm,
then it got really stupid in the she shed. I don't know why everyone had to have silly names, but I've had my she shed now where I'm going to go be creative or paint or whatever. Those are the concepts that we're talking about, but it's a spiritual sacred space.
mhm,
And I'm not dogging a man cave. I think what have at it, or she shed have at it. But it's really the concept was being pushed from a design element,
mhm,
for all kinds of things, which is great. But think about it on a spiritual element. Think about if you choose to have that spot where I can not have to worry about my talismans, or I can keep out, my crystals, or I can put up a prayer card or whatever it is. And you'll start to use your actual tools more if you have those spaces. Many of us have 8 million decks of tarot or oracle cards that are sitting on the shelf. use those in your sacred spaces, you know, do a pull and keep them out with a candle to hold space for that in your space, and so on and so forth, so that you're doing the work to cultivate that space. And I think that
Mhm.
that's really important.
It's really important, and it's easy to fall away from that. Even like
Yeah,
I said, I mean, I pulled a card this morning. I'm like, it just feels so good,
yeah,
to pull a card and set it up and, look at it several times throughout the day,
yeah.
or pull multiple cards, whatever you do. And to have that quiet time for a little bit, just to really adjust to, I think when you get up and you run immediately to do stuff, you don't always like set your tone for the day.
Right.
And
There's not a
I,
focus.
right. And I find myself when I've got a lot scheduled, I don't take that time necessarily. But I think my day would go much better if I did.
Yeah,
So it's like, all right, let's just figure out how to do this at a different time in the morning I can do it every day. It's
yeah.
not dependent on what I have going on for the day. So I think that your point of finding your space is really great, creating what you want it to be, but then you really have to create the habit in there, of how often and when you want to use it.
And
Um,
mostly let go of the guilt. I think what I find so much in the conversations that we are
mm,
having, what
yeah.
the guilt of, I don't match with my friends anymore, my partner anymore, my family anymore, all these things, I'm feeling bad. And it's like, no, there is nothing good or bad about any of this. It's just a change in frequency.
Mhm.
And stop the, I'm better because I'm in 5D. They're not as good because they're in 3D, because that's ridiculous judgment.
That's not it, because I have really great friends that I can hang with in the 3D very
Yeah.
easily.
Yeah. I mean, it's
And
just
for
silly.
me, it's more about certain behaviors or comments or things that just don't align with me anymore. That's what I'm not, going to pursue.
And those are conversational boundaries or whatever boundaries, it's like, oh, up at the cabin, we don't talk religion and politics around the fire after we've had 3 beers, it's not allowed.
That's a
Because
really good rule.
yeah, I mean, that's a dumb thing to do, so there's just boundaries, and that's okay. So therefore there's no judgment the next morning, so I think that these are all areas in our life that we're going to find more and more need
Mhm,
for bigger and bigger spaces. And I
mhm.
and I would just like to really put out there that this is a great thing. It's not a bad thing. It's a
Right,
great thing to want that
right.
space.
And it's
And
a really important
alone,
part of self-care.
yeah, alone time is the older my clients get, many of them are, the older I'm getting, but big common one is, the older I'm getting, the more I like to be alone. And I'm like, that's awesome. And a lot of people are literally saying now, I don't even like being around people. And I said, well, maybe it's time to be around the trees. Maybe
Yeah.
it's time to be around the water. Maybe it's time you're learning on your spiritual journey that it isn't all just about people. You're on this planet with a whole lot of other things to support. And so these are just the ways that we can expand ourselves.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like being on a cruise ship with a lot of people. Mhm.
Ooh. And we're both clamoring off camera to get back to our cabins up north. We're both like, we just need to go back up to the water and sit in the quiet.
I need the water.
Yeah,
Yes.
plan those into your schedules because it's important, right?
Yep. Absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Good. Well, on behalf of Kim and I, hopefully this gives you a little bit of insight, and take what resonates, toss what doesn't, hit the like, subscribe, and share, and maybe leave us a comment. Until next time, Cosmic Hugs.
Goodbye.